the smiling devil in disguise. He handed candies to children, smiled gently at strangers, repaired radios for neighbors without asking a dime. To his village, he was the kind old man everyone trusted, but behind his glasses and soft voice was a secret so horrifying it would make even the coldest heart shiver. Hubert Pilčík didn't just make people vanish, he erased them. No screams, no traces, just silence. He promised freedom and delivered despair. When the truth finally surfaced, all that remained were bones, forged letters, and the story of a monster who wore a mask of kindness. This is the terrifying story of the man known as the Smiling Devil, the man who promised escape. In 1948, as Czechoslovakia fell under strict communist rule, citizens grew desperate to escape. Whispers of a man who could help began to circulate. That man was Hubert Pilčík. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud. He was an elderly man with a soft voice, a kind demeanor, and a promise. I can get you across the border, to freedom. People believed him. Families handed him money. Mothers trusted him with their daughters. He would lead them into the forests at night, supposedly toward Austria or West Germany. But the truth was far darker. Once deep in the woods, Pilčík didn't guide them to safety. He led them to their disappearance. These individuals were never seen again. Their belongings vanished. Their stories abruptly ended. Back in the village, Pilčík returned alone, calmly claiming they made it. They crossed safely. He even mailed letters to loved ones, pretending to be the ones who had escaped. These letters, however, were written in his own hand. He didn't just betray trust, he wiped out entire identities with chilling precision. And no one suspected the quiet man with the warm smile. Behind the door, beneath the floor, Pilčík's home appeared ordinary, almost comforting. Nestled near the edge of the woods, it had blooming flowers outside and a freshly painted fence. But behind one locked door, hidden beneath floorboards and old furniture, was a room no one was meant to find. When authorities finally uncovered it, they were stunned. Inside that space were lengths of rope, leather straps, chains, and handcrafted restraints. The walls were soundproofed. There was no window. In one corner sat a crude bed, and beside it a chair with leather belts attached. It wasn't just a hiding place. It was a prison. Pilčík had lured one young girl there, promising her and her mother that he would help them reach the West. He convinced the mother to let her daughter go first, saying he'd return to get the rest of the family. But he never returned. The girl was held captive in that dark, hidden room. Her movements were restricted, her voice silenced. Days turned to weeks. Pilčík fed her just enough to survive, all while forging letters under her name to deceive her family. But she didn't give up. One day, while Pilčík was away, she broke free from her restraints, pried open the door, and fled. Half-dressed and trembling, she found help. That single act of courage exposed the horrors Pilčík had buried. And it blew the lid off a secret far bigger than anyone had imagined. Childhood of Shadows. Hubert Pilčík was born in 1891 in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. From early on, he was different, quiet, withdrawn. Teachers noted he was intelligent but emotionally distant. He didn't enjoy games or companionship. Instead, he obsessed over gadgets, radios, clocks, anything mechanical. He was the kind of child who spoke more to machines than to people. As he grew older, he trained as an electrician and radio technician, perfecting the art of silence and precision. He never married, never had children, and lived most of his life in solitude. His world was tools, wires, and isolation. Those who knew him said he was polite and soft-spoken, but no one really knew what went on inside. His detached nature, combined with a need for control, became a dangerous combination. What may have started as childhood loneliness evolved into something far darker, a compulsion to dominate lives, to decide who stayed and who disappeared, to not just erase someone, but also recreate their identity, their voice, their final message. He didn't act out of rage. He acted with eerie calm, like a man fixing a broken device. Only in this case, the device was human life, and he believed he had the power to switch it off. The seeds of silence were planted early, and they would grow into the deadliest kind of control. A disappearing trail of letters. When investigators examined Pilčík's home, they uncovered something far stranger than tools or restraints. They found letters, dozens of them, stacked in drawers, hidden under floorboards, and even tucked into books. Each one was handwritten, supposedly from different people who had escaped across the border. They were dated, signed, and addressed to friends or family members. They spoke of reaching safety, starting new lives in the West, and urged loved ones not to worry. But a closer inspection revealed something chilling. The handwriting was the same. Every letter was a forgery. Every word written by Pilcik himself. He had copied the handwriting of each victim, practiced their style, mimicked their phrasing. He used personal information to make the letters believable. And with each forged letter, he bought himself time to make the world forget these people ever existed. He used the letters to cover his tracks, to delay suspicion, and to comfort families who might otherwise raise alarms. For months, sometimes years, families believed their loved ones were safe abroad. Some victims' bank accounts were even drained while their families read cheerful letters about life in the West. Pilcik had turned handwriting into a weapon, not just to deceive, but to erase. Investigators also found women's clothing, shoes, jewelry, even passports and ID documents hidden throughout his house. It became clear he had done this many times, and each time he got away with it. But now the evidence was undeniable. Each item, each letter, each false identity was a thread. Together, they formed a noose around the man once seen as a quiet helper. The authorities built their case, linking each forged letter to a missing person. The story was no longer a mystery, it was a pattern, a system, a routine. And behind it all was the same soft-spoken man with a warm smile and a terrifying secret. The hidden graveyard. When investigators returned to Pilcik's property with shovels and search dogs, they knew they weren't just looking for more letters. They were looking for answers buried in silence and soil. The garden Pilcik once so proudly maintained turned into a crime scene. Underneath the flower beds and around the forest near his home, authorities found what they had feared: shallow graves. Inside the first one, skeletal remains, bound wrists, traces of cloth. A woman's shoes buried separately. In another pit, bones scorched and blackened. Some had been partially burned, others left to decompose naturally. Among the ashes, they found melted buttons, jewelry, and what remained of identity cards. Pilcik had tried to destroy any connection between the remains and the lives they once belonged to. The nearby well revealed even more: bones tossed deep into its darkness, alongside singed documents and pieces of luggage. It became clear Pilcik hadn't just erased people on paper. He had eliminated every physical trace of them. The forest had become his graveyard. Some graves were so old that identification was impossible. Authorities could only guess how long Pilcik had been operating in silence. 5 victims, 10, 20, no one knew for sure. But the pattern was always the same: a promise of escape, a walk into the woods, a life vanishing without a whisper. When the search was complete, the evidence laid out across police tables painted a horrifying image: bracelets still clasped, half-burned clothing, human bones wrapped in canvas. It was no longer a theory. It was history written in remains. The press exploded. Pilcik's name became synonymous with terror. The smiling devil, they called him. Neighbors who once shared meals with him couldn't believe it. Families wept, not just for justice, but for closure they would never receive. Pilcik had turned his home into a trap, his charm into a weapon, and his land into a graveyard of freedom seekers. What made it worse was how calmly he maintained the illusion. He greeted neighbors, he handed out sweets, all while secrets screamed from the ground beneath his feet. And even now, decades later, many believe that not all of his victims were ever found. The final interrogation. Once the full scale of Pilčík's horrors had been unearthed, the authorities moved swiftly. Hubert Pilčík was arrested and taken into custody. The news spread like wildfire. Reporters gathered outside the detention center, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man behind the atrocities. But inside the gray, silent interrogation room, a different picture emerged. Pilčík sat calmly, his hands rested in his lap. He didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't beg. His demeanor was chilling, serene, as though he didn't grasp the enormity of what he had done. Or worse, as though he didn't care. Detectives asked him questions, showed him photos, laid out letters, clothing, even bones. He barely blinked. When asked directly about the young girl he had imprisoned in his home, he simply replied, "She was safe. I took care of her." It was the kind of statement that left even hardened officers disturbed. His answers weren't angry or emotional. They were logical, methodical, and detached. When asked about the graves, he replied coldly, "There's no evidence they didn't reach the border." He maintained the illusion even when the truth surrounded him. Days passed. The case against him was growing stronger by the hour. Witnesses came forward. Forensic teams tied the remains to missing people. Financial records revealed stolen funds. Even the forged letters had matching paper and ink samples. Still, Pilčík remained unmoved. Psychologists were brought in. They studied his responses, his background, his behavior. What emerged was a chilling profile, a man who lacked empathy, who viewed people not as human beings, but as pieces in a larger puzzle he could arrange, manipulate, and discard. The plan was to put him on trial. The public wanted answers. Families wanted closure. Authorities needed accountability. A date was being finalized, and Pilčík would be formally charged with multiple counts tied to disappearances, unlawful detainment, and exploitation. But just days before the trial, something unexpected happened. One morning, guards arrived to escort him to another interview. They found him unresponsive in his cell. Pilčík had taken his own life. No warning, no note, no explanation. The man who once promised freedom and delivered horror had exited the world the same way he committed his crimes, quietly, without remorse, and leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions. The public was stunned, families devastated. Some were furious they'd never get to face him in court. Others feared he had taken secrets with him, names, numbers, more victims they might never uncover. His cell was searched thoroughly. Among his few possessions, they found sketches of mechanical devices, some radio diagrams, and a small, worn notebook. It was empty, as though he had one last message. Everything you want to know, you'll never find. The case closed, but not completely. Bodies remained unidentified. Dozens of letters remained unmatched. Some families still clung to hope their loved ones had made it across the border. But deep down, they knew. The man with the soft smile and wire-rimmed glasses had fooled them all. Right until the very end. A smile that buried truth. In the end, Hubert Pilčík left behind no confession, no remorse, and no clear count of how many lives he erased. His story remains one of Europe's darkest forgotten nightmares. A tale of false hope, manipulated trust, and silent endings. He wasn't a monster hiding in the shadows. He was hiding in plain sight, tending gardens, fixing radios, smiling kindly at neighbors. It was that ordinary charm that made him invisible for so long. Because who would ever suspect the old man with gentle eyes? His crimes weren't just physical. They were psychological. He stole futures, rewrote identities, and crafted illusions that lasted years. He didn't just trap bodies. He trapped memories. And to this day, a full truth remains buried, not just beneath the soil around his home, but within the hundreds of unanswered questions his life left behind. What Pilcik did cannot be undone, but his story stands as a warning. Sometimes the most terrifying evil wears the warmest smile. Unanswered graves. Even after his death, Pilcik's shadow haunted the villages near his home. His boarded-up house became a symbol of unspoken horror. Locals avoided it, whispering that the ground still held secrets. Neighbors once friendly with him were left stunned. "He fixed my radio," one recalled. "He gave my boy candy," another said. Now every memory felt tainted. Families of victims struggled most. Some had received cheerful letters, now known to be fakes. Others believed their loved ones had made it to safety, only to learn it was a lie. The betrayal was personal, deep, and irreversible. Graves were discovered, but answers were not. Some bodies remained unidentified. No words explained the why. And with Pilcik gone, the silence only deepened. The forest was searched again. Police returned with dogs and scanners, but the land gave up no more. For the world, his story faded into history, but for the families, it never ended. He stole. Because Pilcik didn't just steal lives. He stole the truth and left behind graves with no names and a smile that still lingers.
The case may be closed, but criminology never sleeps. Like and subscribe at Join Criminology and step deeper into the dark with us.